I wanted to share with you a letter I received from a subscriber. Her name is Serena Spades, and she's from Maine. And she wrote a very eloquent letter. But one of the things she mentioned, page 2, was she really has an anxiety over power loss. She says that it isn't often accurately reported in the paper. When they say they have a 2 to 3 day power outage, a lot of people have over a week, and this happens quite often. And remember, in Maine, if this happens in the middle of the winter, that can be really a problem. They can have way below zero temperatures. People, as she put here, people could easily freeze to death. And she's just wondering, she says, I just think it's ridiculous and careless of electricity companies to not take care of its people. And it's a real worry of hers. And it's interesting. At the end of the letter, she said she talked to her mother, who was close to 70 years old, and she said she was young. They never had any power outages. And then she talked to her grandfather, who said something similar. So she says, can you believe that my mother and grandfather were talking about a time, the 1950s through the 1970s, with zero power outages? I found that really, really interesting. She included this article. It was Maine had longer, more frequent power outages per customer than any other state in 2017. One of the things that really hit home was when she said, her mother and grandmother didn't remember losing power when they were growing up. And it made me think, I don't remember it either. I am sure if I went 3 days in the winter here in Michigan and we didn't have power, I would have remembered it. But I don't. Could there have been small little power outages? You lose your electricity and it comes back on within a half hour? Sure. But I really don't remember any. So I talked to my husband. He said the same thing. I talked to people at work that were 50 and older. They said the same thing. So what's going on? Well, I did a little research, so I'm going to be looking at this paper once in a while, but I wanted to share this with you. So I found some statistics, and it was saying for the 1950s to the 1980s in our area, significant power outages averaged fewer than 5 per year, but that's changed. In 2007 there were 76, in 2011 more than 300. So you can just see it's an increase. But again, why? Why is that happening? I had to think, is it because of usage? When I was in grade school, we used power for lights, and we had a refrigerator, and I think our dryer was gas, and our water heater was gas, I know. And we had a gas stove, so didn't have electricity there. But of course we had the black and white TV right in the kitchen, so we could watch all the terrible news about what was happening in Vietnam while we ate our dinner. But then just before the moonwalk, my mom went out and bought a new color TV console, and the whole neighborhood came, so we had that. We did not have air conditioning. We did have some fans going, but I guess you can get the idea. Now usage, I'm sure, is much higher per household. One of the reasons is air conditioning, and now of course people are having electric cars, and we all have computers and a lot of appliances that use electricity. But is that the only reason? Is it because there's more usage? I don't think so. Okay, how about weather? One thing I read, it says Michigan ranks among the worst states for number of outages caused by weather and downed trees. Interesting. Yeah, we do have windstorms that come through, thunderstorms, twisters, that type of thing, and that does cause a problem. But didn't we have them before? I mean, let's look at that weather thing. Weather, of course we all hear about climate change, but in honesty, high wind tornadoes was worse when I was growing up than it is now. From 1953 to 1977, Michigan saw a dozen tornadoes ranked F4 or F5s, and since 1977 we've had none. The only F5 tornado ever to hit West Michigan was April 3rd, 1956, about 9 months after I was born. I remember it because my mom was always talking about it, because she, of course, was talking to my aunt who lived in Standale, saying, boy, you better get in the basement. And, of course, while they were talking on the phone, it hit. 17 people lost their lives, 340 were injured, and it was estimated at over 200-mile-per-hour wind. And then 10 years after, there was the Palm Sunday tornadoes. Those ripped through the Midwest, but here in West Michigan, they hit hard, and we had F4 tornadoes that did a heck of a lot of damage. I remember getting in the car with my parents and, surveying who had roofs and who didn't in certain neighborhoods, and who even had a house left. Now, we had something different in May of 1998. It was called, I think, a derecho. Yeah. It was a line of thunderstorms traveling from 970 miles from South Dakota to the Atlantic Ocean in just 15 hours. And it hit us at 70 miles per hour, and winds even got up to 130 miles per hour west of town. So really, these were much worse than we have been getting lately. So we could say, well, I should remember more power outages when I was young then, but I don't. So I don't think weather is the only cause. I think a big cause is the age of our equipment. Let me read you a quote from Sally Talberg, the chairperson of the Michigan Public Service Commission, said Michigan utilities have a lot of aging equipment. Some is 80 years old. It served us well, but it's something we need to be on schedule to report. Well, Michigan is not alone at that. A report by the National Governors Association found that 70% of the nation's transmission lines and transformers are at least 25 years old, and 60% of circuit breakers are at least 30 years old. It's noted that much of the infrastructure was designed in the 1950s. Okay, I think that's the key. I was born in the 1950s. We had all new infrastructure. We were not seeing all the blackouts like we see now. Interestingly enough, the American Societies of Engineers gave the entire infrastructure for our grid a rating of D+. I guess we'll pass, but isn't that almost failing? So, we've already discussed weather as threats to our grid. Another thing that happens a lot is trees. That's right, trees. When high winds happen, the trees or limbs can fall, and that takes down the wires, and then we have blackouts. So I know locally, as much as I hated it, last year they really did a path of cutting down all mature trees, and some of them were very beautiful, very large, but they were cut down nevertheless. So anything near wire couldn't fall and disrupt power. And I think that has made a difference in our blackouts. So one of the problems might also be that there is more mature trees in the areas, and that is causing problems with the lines. So one of the threats I think we need to really be worried about is hacking. I watched a video, and I'll put the link down below. It was by Tech Insider, and it shows a firm who was hired to try to break into or hack into this energy company's system. And it shows that there were a lot of vulnerabilities. It was interesting. They used anything from social engineering to technology to just invasive procedures. But it showed how easy it was for them to actually gain control of the system. But there is a worry about people hacking our system from overseas. Dan Coates, the director of the National Intelligence at the time, was clear about these dangers. In a report to the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, he said, China has the ability to launch cyber attacks that cause localized, temporary, disruptive effects on critical infrastructure, such as disruption of natural gas pipeline for days to weeks in the United States. He goes on to say that Russia has the ability to execute cyber attacks in the United States that generate localized, temporary, disruptive effects on critical infrastructure. Okay, and I got an idea that we probably also have that ability for other countries. But that is a real worry. If you want to hit us where it hurts, take down our electrical system. no longer, Wall Street's not working. Businesses can't do what they need to do over the internet. Cash registers are no longer working. ATMs are no longer working. I mean, of course it'll affect the individual home, but it would also really affect our economy. Now, I read that DARPA received a grant of $8.6 million. They are working on something called RADIX, the Rapid Attack Detection, Isolation, and Characterization Program. And what that was hoping to do is to detect and contain threats on the power grid. So we are putting some money to try to rectify the situation. Now, from what I understand, technology keeps changing so quick that causes additional problems. You know, the Internet of Things causes a lot of problems, a lot of backdoors into various systems, and a lot of vulnerabilities. And in Wyoming, California, in spring of this year, there was supposedly a cyber threat event which took down the power grid. I haven't really gotten all the details, but the question is, who did the hacking? And of course the threat comes from a solar flare or an EMP, be it man-made or natural. This would be devastating. Again, we are finally starting to look into some systems that can give us an early detection if this might happen. I think a lot of things in our infrastructure are starting to deteriorate, and we really, as a country, need to look hard at it. One of those things, I believe, is our power grid. But you need money to fix it, right? Where's that money going to come from? Well, in the future, if they have to replace a lot of equipment, you may be paying more for your electricity. Or you might be taxed more for the country as a whole. But somewhere we have to get the money to fix this problem. You know, I have commented before when there are people who want to have this very expensive wall built between the United States and Mexico. I said I'd rather see that money go for something that is a threat that could take down our whole country, and that is if something happened to our power grid. So I really believe we need to spend more money and look at different technologies to protect our grid. Now, I understand that there's other problems. One of the things is maybe our whole grid structure is becoming outdated, because as we have more and more renewable energy resources, the structure we have is not really the best for them. But again, that would be even more expensive, even more money to get the new grid to accommodate that. So, Serena, I don't think there is any quick answer, but I think you are right. There are more blackouts now. What should you do about it? Well, number one, have a blackout kit. I have a video about that if you're interested. Make sure you have enough food and water and some way to heat in the winter if you do lose power for an extended period of time. Well, also, Serena, I wanted to thank you very much for sending this guide with a letter. I love the bright neon color, but it's you alone in the Maine woods, but really it applies completely here to Michigan and the wooded area. Tells how to have a fire, to keep yourself warm, build shelters, even mental control, signaling, edible wild foods. It's a great little tiny reference book, and I really appreciate you sending it. So, I gotta ask you out there, do you remember what it was like when you were young? Did you have many blackouts? Do you have more blackouts now? I'd love to know what everybody else thinks. And if you are experiencing more blackouts, why do you think that is? Please comment below. As always, thank you so much for subscribing to my channel and watching my videos. And remember, power is knowledge. Thumbs up if you like this video, and if you want to receive future videos, just click that little bell below. Thank you.